YouTube, what the crap's going on? Heir of Carthage here, and yes, I've got another battle in Total War, Warhammer 2. I'm going to be playing as the Lizardmen up against the Vampire Coast. I have a couple of replays that I'm going to squeeze into this video, and just kind of show these and talk a little bit about it. So, what we did on the stream this week in terms of the multiplayer stream with the community that I do every Tuesday was I played matchups where I get picked a faction, and then my opponent gets to use a faction that is typically thought of as the hard counter to my own faction. So that is kind of how we started things off with these matchups. So I got the Lizardmen, and then the Coast was chosen by the chat to be the kind of hard counter faction. So what I did was I chose a whole bunch of skink cohorts with javelins, and actually this army is one that I think it's Shetland Apache sent something in very similar to this, and I basically ripped it off and kind of made it kind of my own here, but it's really just a rip-off of his army. And basically the Coast, some people might be saying, well, why is the Coast a hard counter to the Lizardmen? Well, they have lots of armor-piercing missiles, excellent long range that the Lizardmen just can't answer from range, and then they have lots of cheap throwaway infantry that can hold the line until all those ranged units have done their damage. And so the Coast tends to be thought of as a hard counter to the Lizardmen, especially if the Lizardmen are playing a more traditional style of army. What I've done is spread out all over the battlefield, and my skinks are really cheap. All of my damage is concentrated into a Dread Saurian and Kroq-Gar, as well as a skink priest who can do some summons, and then a little bit of damage left here for my Pterodon riders with Fire Leech bolas, who I'm hoping to get in behind enemy lines and do some damage, and at least just keep their attention up here while my skink cohorts approach the battle. And as I get close enough, I'm going to have my skinks go ahead and well, here I screwed up, but I'm going to try and have them unleash their javelins where it's possible to get a little bit of extra damage done. This is one of the benefits of having javelin armed skinks, is they can sometimes get some extra work done. You can see, though, that the Coast does have some range, though, interestingly enough, he chose Queen Bess, which is really more of an anti-infantry focus, and it does work. It's getting occasional hits on my skinks, and it's been absolutely devastating. And then he's also got some mortars supporting that rather than carronades, and I think my opponent made some key mistakes here. Here's a nice win to death, actually. Almost got a hold of 2 skink units with it, so nice play by Noctilus there. So in any case, yeah, his cannons are not anti-large armor piercing. They're just anti-infantry. And I intentionally brought a lot of units that won't really be very good payoff for these mortars. And in fact, if he had carronades right now, he could be shooting my Dread Saurian in the face with those, as well as Noctilus causing massive damage. Meanwhile, I've got Kroq-Gar over here fighting the giant hermit crab. So I sent Kroq-Gar on an anti-large mission, and I sent the Saurian over here to tie down all of his missiles. You can see he is going to turn all the handguns, but this gives me the opportunity to bring in the Fire Leech bolas and basically give the Dread Saurian some cover that it's going to need. And what I'm trying to do here is hit my opponent from every direction at once. I've got some skink cohorts over here, I've got the Fire Leech bolas, I got the Dread Saurian, I dropped the Manticore on him, and now I've got a skink chief and a skink priest coming in as well. And up close like this, the Fire Leech bolas are going to do quite a lot of damage to the low armor Vampire Coast units. You can see I'm having to bring my skinks back into the fight where I can get the opportunity. And again, this is playing out very similar to it did when I believe, like I said, I think it was Apache who sent me this one. If I'm wrong, then I apologize, but I totally ripped this army off of him, by the way. This was not my idea, but it goes to show a good lesson, which is when you end up in a matchup, and you'll see whether or not I win this. There's no guarantee that I win this. It's a decent fight for me so far, but there's a lot of tough units left. You can see that Kroq-Gar is actually not doing great against the Rotting Leviathan. And Noctilus is still untouched over here, and he's causing quite a lot of damage to my Dread Saurian. In any case, what I was getting at here is when you're facing these matchups where it seems like the nightmare matchup for you, basically you have to get unconventional and think of ways where you can hurt your opponent in such a way that, you know, will go against, like, so think about your typical Vampire Coast army. I'm lucky here he didn't have carronades. I think I would have suffered a lot more damage already if he had carronades, but let's just talk about what's here. I knew my opponent would have artillery because he's the Coast. I knew he would have to have handguns and stuff because I picked Lizardmen. Like, he has to bring the anti-large just in case, because if not, the Lizardmen can absolutely trounce you with it. And so what I'm doing is taking a matchup that's bad for me and trying to play it against my opponent in the sense that, okay, well, I'm going to bring a whole bunch of mobility to challenge all of the range that he's going to have, because he's going to have to camp around the artillery. And if he does, I'll just hammer him with Fire Leech Bolas. I'll get around the flanks with Skinks. I'll attack the front line with Skinks. And then Krokgar will be a threat to any monsters. Well, at least I had hoped so. He's apparently very weak against a Rotting Leviathan for whatever reason. And then my Dread Saurian over here, if he gets in to all these squishy targets, he's going to do massive damage. And that was the idea here, was basically just give myself a way to shut down my opponent's damage-dealing components. And that's why this army, as it was picked by Apache, I believe, is so beautiful in the sense that it's not a traditional Lizardmen army, and it plays against the strength that the Coast has. Now, will you win with something like this every time? I don't think so. I think that the Coast is still a pretty darn excellent counter to the Lizardmen as a whole. And I think that I got lucky here in the sense that my opponent has invested this money in Queen Bess and the mortars. If he had brought Carronades and then saved the money on Bess and put some pole arms, I would be still facing a much larger uphill fight. I've still got a bit of an interesting fight here. It shows the balance bar in my favor, but I've still got to kill Noctilus and the Rotting Leviathan and a Gunnery Wight. So we've done good damage. I'm able to bring the Dread Saurian, the Manticore, and Krokgar all to bear at the same time against Noctilus because I've gotten rid of all of his chaff. But even still, you can see the Dread Saurian took massive damage in this process. The Manticores have been very, very helpful to me, helping me to dish a lot of damage. And for whatever reason, Krokgar's doing great against Noctilus. He's doing terrible against the Rotting Leviathan. I don't know if it's what the difference is here, really. They ought to be fairly similar. But nonetheless, there we are. The Pterodon Riders with Fire Leech Bolas, I was trying to do some extra damage versus the Rotting Leviathan. Just doing whatever I can. It's got heavy armor, though, so even with all this fire, it's not going to do a ton. But like I said, just doing anything I can because I've got to draw down the hit points of the Coast, and I really need to get rid of Noctilus, who summoned yet another zombie meat shield here. So I'm going to try and explode it with Krokgar so I can stay in the fight up against Noctilus. Now the Rotting Leviathan's here, though, and so once again, I'm kind of in big trouble. But fortunately for me, Noctilus starts to take some damage, and also his leadership starts to take a hit. My Fire Leech Bola is just kind of emptying everything they've got into this fight, and they have managed to do some damage to the Rotting Leviathan and the zombie deckhand mobs, but again, it's been tough. I took my Skink Chief over here to see how he would do in a fight against a Gunnery Wight. So we'll see how that goes. I've got to get rid of that Gunnery Wight, but at least for the time being, he can't shoot Krokgar. And then I brought my Skink Priest in here because I've got to throw everything I can into this fight. Have to get rid of Noctilus if I want to have any chance to finish this one. You can see Noctilus trying to get out of the fight, and I really can't let him do it. Got Krokgar coming back at it over here. He manages to get another good chomp on Noctilus. And there's some more units coming in to try and help tile this down. So here comes my Fire Leech Bolas. I'm going to actually bring them into melee. They were going to attack Noctilus to make sure he died. Now I can use them to swamp the Rotting Leviathan, make it harder for it to get hits. It has done tremendous damage to Krokgar. Like, I am blown away at how much damage this Rotting Leviathan has managed to cause to Krokgar. In any case, I'm finally able to swamp the Leviathan, but I'm still having trouble with the Gunnery Wight, so I decided to maybe just pull my Skink Chief back and just shoot the Gunnery Wight and see if that turns out better than the melee, because the melee was really not going great for me against the Gunnery Wight. But here we go, I can poison him and shoot him. And with the death of the Rotting Leviathan, the Gunnery Wight can't hold on to his leadership, and I do manage to eke out a win here. Again, I think some of this has to do with the fact that my opponent kind of did me a favor here by having Mortars and Queen Bess. You might say, well, Air, they got some kills. Yeah, but they're against Skinks. It wasn't worth it. So imagine a Carronade, 2 Carronades, and then instead of this being Queen Bess, it's 3 or 4 more pole arms, and I lose this fight. And it goes to show why I say I probably lose this fight. It depends on whether I was able to use my Fire Leech Bolas to rip through enough pole arms and stuff like that, right? But I'm just giving you the example here that with the Carronades, Krokgar and the Dread Saurian would have suffered quite a lot of damage from those. And again, this is why the Vampire Coast is kind of a hard counter to the Lizardmen, and I think it's fun to play these matchups. Number one, if you're playing as the faction who's considered worse in the matchup, then it gives you a chance to try and see, well, what can I do to try and improve my chances? And number two, if you're the player playing on the other side of it, gives you an opportunity to try and see how to use one faction's strength against another. So these kind of matchups can be fun. I would say don't avoid them, especially in a lobby like this, you know, where I'm just playing against players from my Discord and we're just having a good time of it. Protocol, by the way, has been a fantastic member of the community recently. He's been extremely generous to me on streams and stuff, and I just want to thank Protocol for all the support and the years of viewership. It's been absolutely fantastic. I have some upcoming streams where I'm going to be painting some Warhammer miniatures, and because of like Joe T and Protocol here, I'm going to be able to have the miniatures and all the paints. We're going to have some fun with that, so appreciate him and playing a fun game with me here. Like I said, I managed to pull that one out. There was one more matchup we wanted to play, though, and that was Dark Elves versus Empire. So let's go check that one out. Now, I love me some Dark Elves. I know that they're not the most favored faction in competitive multiplayer these days, but I still find that I have success with them more often than I have defeat. And Dark Elves are a faction that I still consider to be kind of a jack of all trades, but not really a master of any, though if they were to be a master of something, they do have a decent bit of monsters to bring to bear in a fight. So single entities are probably some of their bigger strengths. And they have a couple of very good lords as well. I don't play Dark Elves basically without Morathi, so I guess this makes me probably too predictable. I've got Morathi. She has her Enchanting Beauty and Heartrender and Dark Sword. And I've brought an army here, so let's first slow down for a second, kind of talk about the matchup. Why is Empire kind of a nightmarish matchup for the Dark Elves? Well, the Empire has supremely good light cavalry. They have good support with handguns to rip through monsters. They have good support with lords. Their infantry, yes, the Dark Elves can win an infantry fight, but when it comes to cheap infantry versus cheap infantry, the Empire actually matches up very closely. The Dread Spears, Bleak Swords with their swordsmen and spears. The Empire is just a pretty solid matchup against the Dark Elves as a whole. I'm going to be playing this one against Broken Sky, or Once Aspiring Amoeba, as he is known both ways, I think, in my community. And anyway, we'll see how this goes. Now, what I have banked on here is I brought infantry that can match his own and a few that can beat it. So what I'm hoping to do is put some pressure on his infantry line in just a couple spots with the Black Art Corsairs, but mostly I've gone cheap on infantry. And I've also brought a Witch Elf to help berserk any monsters, cavalry, or if they end up having to fight Empire infantry, they'll do very well. I've brought 2 units of Cold One Knights to have some armor-piercing anti-large. I have 3 units of Dark Riders with shields in case I have to chase off light cavalry. Now, interestingly enough, Amoeba has chosen to go with war wagons, including the Black Lions, rather than just typical like Pistoliers or Outriders, which is an odd choice. He may be able to answer why he did that in the chat. But honestly, when I saw the war wagons, I wasn't like thrilled about them, but I was glad they weren't Pistoliers or Outriders. But you can see that Morathi is getting absolutely destroyed right now by the Black Lions, and then also got hit by Balthasar. I don't remember if Balthasar got a shot on her with Final Transmutation or not yet, but the Black Lions absolutely owning Morathi, and I've got to do something about it. So again, this shows how the Empire's range can be very good. So I'm going to bring these horsemen, and I had a couple units of Harpies, and basically the deal here is I have to keep their specialty units busy for long enough with the Harpies and light cavalry in order to let my infantry go ahead and win the fight and give Morathi an opportunity to make her presence felt on the battlefield. Now with Morathi, magic-wise, I've got a Soul Stealer and a Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma. Mystifying Miasma can be good at slowing down light cavalry and helping you catch it, or in this case I got a Speedy Lord like Balthasar. It can be good at slowing him down and helping me catch him. He is getting a Final Transmutation in, but I got a Soul Stealer off at the same time, so should be able to mostly offset the Final Transmutation, though both of us spent probably pretty close to the same amount of magic on that. Soul Stealer and Final Transmutation are pretty expensive, but Morathi actually probably gained just a few hit points out of this situation. You can see I've got a Manticore now. I'm gonna send it chasing after Balthasar. Why? Just so he can't cast any more spells on me. So I had 2 Feral Manticores as well, and basically my idea here was to have supreme mobility as the Dark Elves. 5 units of cavalry, 4 flying units, and then a decent infantry line, and also a flying lord. The idea here is I know what the Empire's good at, which is hitting me with their specialty units, and I'm just going to overwhelm them. And you can see here I got attacked by the Royal Altdorf Griffites. I threw in the Witch Elves. They berserked them and got them stuck in a fight they don't want to be in, so I'm able to get rid of the Altdorf Griffites. You see here the Manticore is keeping Balthasar busy. Can't catch him, but he can keep him on the run. My Harpies may not be able to kill the War Wagon in its entirety, especially when being chased by this Warrior Priest. They can sure as heck keep them out of the fight for the time being. And what that does is it allows me to win some fights with my Blackheart Corsairs. You've seen that here. The Blackheart Corsairs got attacked by the Griffites, supported by the Witch Elves and the Cold One Knights. We killed the Griffites, and now we'll be able to kill the Spearmen. So now I have an advantage on the ground. I've still got some mobility left. I have some Corsairs that have come back ready for a second fight. So we're going to be in good shape here. We're going to be in very good shape in terms of dealing with the Empire infantry. Now we just have to get rid of its leadership. So again, my goal in army picking here is to try and flip the enemy's advantage on its head. And whether I'm successful or not, we'll see. The battle's not over yet, but it is looking good for me at the moment. Balthasar is in big trouble. He's having to deal with this Manticore. He actually gets caught. Remember that Melkoth mystifying miasma. I'm going to use it here, and then Marathi's going to come in and really just finish off Balthasar, which should finish this fight. So again, I'm able to use the mobility. Now, let's say for a minute that Amoeba had brought Pistoliers. That would have been a lot more challenging, because let's say that he kept the Black Lions, but he had Pistoliers and was able to do a little bit better job keeping his Black Lions protected. Now, I wouldn't have made that easy. I would even suicide a unit after the Black Lions if I had to, right? I'm not going to make that easy. But I do like the idea of the Black Lions. It gives them some mobility rather than being tied down to a cannon position. But cannons are also quite good. They can all be good. But in this case, again, just trying to do my best to run all over the map and make it difficult for the Empire player to do what he needs to do with the support units. You can see the Black Lions got free again and put some shots on my Manticore. These are very excellent artillery. I mean, just look at the missile strength here. They'll rip up anything they hit. Absolutely rip it up. I'm going to send the Dark Riders and Marathi over here to try and silence them once and for all. I was able to use my Harpies again just to try and keep this Warrior Priest busy. And I will end up being able to get a win here. My build ended up working out. But again, Empire probably is a pretty decent counter to the Dark Elves. Again, it's going to depend on how the Dark Elf player plays, what the skill level is, the skill level of the Empire player. All that stuff comes into factor. Don't get me wrong, right? I managed to win both of these, not because I'm some outstanding player. Two reasons. One, I knew the matchups I was going into. And number one, I ripped off the Lizardmen build. That wasn't a build of my own thinking. I very well could have lost making my own build, and probably would have, because I don't tend to be good at playing Lizardmen in multiplayer. So yeah, I'm just saying, like, I had the benefit of the doubt here in that I've gotten to see a really nice, helpful build against the Vampire Coast with the Lizards. As the Dark Elves, that's probably my most comfortable faction, whereas I feel like the Empire is a good faction and possibly a counter one. For me, at least, I feel like the Empire is harder to play than the Dark Elves. So, like, right here, all I had to do was rush and just keep the pressure on. The Empire player is the one that's got to have the higher skill level here and know when and where and how to stop my rush and pick me apart, right? So I feel like that, again, I'm trying to play these to my advantage. I don't have the micromanagement to play that kind of Empire army, but the people who do, you know, it'd be tough. It'd be very tough to beat that kind of thing. You can understand why the Empire, like I said, could be considered a good counter to the Dark Elves, and probably are. I don't think I disagree with that, that the Empire should be able to give the Dark Elves a nice challenge. But at the same time, like, again, this is just me. I don't play on the competitive scene, so I'm sure I'm wrong, but I don't understand why the Dark Elves have gotten so much dislike in the competitive scene. Like, I heard a lot of people saying, well, they're just not very good. They seem totally viable to me in many respects. Maybe they're not as good as some other factions, I get that, but they still seem really decent. But everybody's tier list that I see with the Dark Elves, they have them, like, down in the dregs recently, and I'm not sure I understand that. I feel like the Dark Elves are still a pretty darn decent faction in multiplayer. Though, if you think I'm wrong, I really do want to hear why. Like, help me understand it, because I understand there's a lot of things that I don't know about the competitive multiplayer in this game, and so I'm very open-minded to hear people explain it. Please do, in fact. Like, if you feel like you have the knowledge on that, I would love to hear it. Like, what has changed, why you think that's changed, and how, when you're looking at two competitive players of equal skill level, why the Dark Elves might be objectively worse than some of the other factions. Again, because I feel like they have quite a bit of flexibility, honestly, in their builds. They have quite a bit of magic. They have a decent bit of monsters. They have a lot of mobility. They have some good cavalry choices, both light and heavy. They've got flyers. They've got the feral manticores, which are really great and cheap. It's kind of like having access to eagles, like the Wood Elves do, and High Elves. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of good units there. Like, I feel like the Dark Elves are a pretty flexible roster. Probably the one place where they're weak is artillery. And they have Reaper bolt throwers. which are a very situational unit, Reaper Bolt Throwers, right? There's situations in which they're good, and then a lot of situations in which they're bad. But I don't know. In any case, that's just my thoughts on the Dark Elves. Like I said, curious what you all think. Hope you enjoyed these. If you want to play multiplayer battles with me, every Tuesday I do streams with you all, the community that watches this channel, the folks on my Discord, all that kind of stuff. Anybody's welcome to join. New players are welcome to join. Come join us. Don't feel afraid. We play and we have fun. And that's what we were doing this last week, where I tried these counter matchups. We also did some FFA at the end. It was just a lot of fun. So please feel free to join us. There's a link in the description to the Discord if you want to join. It's a great community. Good place to talk to people, get some social interaction, and find people to play games with. Not just Total War games. The people in my Discord love playing a lot of other games too. So, you know, we don't just limit it to that. So come on and join us. It'll be great. You'll enjoy it. I know you will. Anyway, HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I will see you all soon.